Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, April the 22nd, 2024. This weekend we had the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and I suppose some people might be wondering, well, what was all that about? I don't think we should have expected anything to happen on a personal level. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. On a collective level, I think the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is important, and I think we perhaps saw some evidence of its importance. And I'm thinking particularly of this bill that was passed in the House of Representatives, this foreign aid bill, which released this money for Ukraine and other places, I think for Israel, Taiwan. It also allowed for the confiscation of Russian assets and for them to be passed on to Ukraine. Quite how many assets are involved is up to debate. I think most of Russia's assets are actually in Europe, so that doesn't necessarily mean to say that immediately Russian money is going to be going to Ukraine. But I do think the House Foreign Aid Bill is very much connected with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And remember, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is the thank the Lord aspect, at least according to Reinhold Ebertin, this great sense of relief. And so many people in the United States and perhaps in Ukraine, maybe not ordinary people in Ukraine, but people like Zelensky are feeling this great sense of relief. Finally, the money's coming, and everything's fine. War, not fine, but they can turn the corner in a war against Russia, and so a lot of people are happy. So I thought I would look at this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in the light of a foreign aid bill, and things are not quite as they seem. Another thing that happened just before the conjunction was the self-immolation of Max Azzarello. It was outside the Trump's trial, and we've got an exact time for that self-immolation. We also have a birth date for Max Azzarello, in the sense that I looked at Wikipedia page and there was a link, and there was a link to some site about California births, and it gave a birth time, and I'm going to go for that birth time. If that birth time is not right, my apologies, but certainly not birth time, birth date. But I want to consider that self-immolation in the light of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And if possible, I want to consider what's going on in light of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which took place at the end of 2020, with particular reference to the US. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Monday, April the 22nd, 2024. So here is the chart for noon, set for New York, April 22nd, and there we see the moon at 18 degrees 17 Libra. I mean, the precise position doesn't really matter. I have to have a chart for somewhere. So when you see moon 18 degrees Libra, you say, well, moon's just entering the Via Combusta. That Via Combusta, part of the sky between 15 Libra, 15 Scorpio. So really from now on, through till sort of Wednesday, Thursday, for a few days, we have the moon moving through the Via Combusta, the flaming path. And the moon moves through the Via Combusta every month. In itself, it's not particularly special, but it can be a time where things are a little unstable, where things don't work quite as we expect. So we might think that things are going to go one way and they might go the other way. And it's just important that we always have a standby plan. And so if we've got very fixed plans, and we're expecting people to behave in a particular way, and we're expecting events to pan out in a certain direction, we might be surprised. That doesn't mean to say we're talking about failure, but it's just that there may be disruption and things happening that force us to change our plan. We can still get to where we want to go to, but perhaps not using the route we were expecting to use. And that moon in Libra, okay, we can say a couple of things about that moon in Libra, aside from being in a Vir combustor. Yeah, it's in Libra. It's in an air sign. And that is about communication. It's about balance. It's about compromise. You know, moon in Libra doesn't like to have difficult situations, all things being equal. Let's keep everyone happy. But moon in Libra is conjunct the South Node. So when you've got a planet conjunct the South Node, one perhaps needs to think that this planet may not always be behaving in a constructive way. It might be leading us in a direction that isn't necessarily the best direction. So the South Node can often be connected with the past behavior, which perhaps we should have grown out of. And so with the Moon conjunct South Node, perhaps compromise is not the way forward. Yes, we would like everything to be balanced, happy, no arguments. Let's sweep all the problems under the carpet. That's the easy path, the line of least resistance, but it's not necessarily the right path. The right path may be the North Node in Aries, fairly close to a conjunction with Mercury. We have to be assertive, particularly on a verbal level. If something isn't right, we need to say it isn't right. In most cases, of course, there are certain situations where we have to keep our mouth shut because maybe there's a safety concern, or we really are in danger of blowing up a relationship. But we do have to consider the situation. For example, if you buy something in a shop, or and you don't like what you bought, or you've hired someone to do some work for you, and the work isn't up to standard, tell them. It's not a time to keep quiet about it in most cases. So that's the moon. I think that is possibly the main thing going on today. The moon is opposition Mercury, and I think that moon opposition Mercury today, remember the moon and Mercury are the two communication planets. Moon is more about emotional communication. Mercury is more about intellectual, mental communication. It depends on the situation. For example, Donald Trump, I sometimes think he communicates through his moon in Sagittarius rather than his Mercury in Cancer. I don't know what you think, but we shouldn't just think only Mercury is about communication. And with moon opposition Mercury, there is the struggle to communicate in the right way. And with an opposition, we could easily say the wrong thing. I think we're more likely to say the wrong thing if we're trying to keep everyone happy. Because it may be a case that if we try to keep everyone happy, we may cause more trouble, more arguments, more stress than if we're just honest straight away. If we understand right from the beginning that really we can't keep everyone happy. Moon is also making an opposition with Venus. That opposition with Venus is going to be more of an issue if you're in the Americas than if you're, say, in certainly Australia and New Zealand. I don't think Australia and New Zealand moon opposition Venus is going to be an issue. Western Europe, to an extent, but it's particularly the case if you're in the Americas. Moon opposition Venus can be overindulgent, can be emotionally overindulgent, can just be perhaps vulnerable to emotional exaggeration. It can also have a financial element. You've got the moon and Venus is sometimes luxury-loving planets. I know the moon isn't really associated with, isn't always associated with luxury, but moon opposition Venus can be a bit lazy and luxury-loving, and yes, indulgent. It can just want things, and it could spend things. You always have to be careful with stressful aspects involving the moon and Venus. It can represent over expenditure. So maybe moon opposition Venus, for certain people, it may be we feel that to keep everyone happy we need to spend money. I don't think that is a constructive way to use this aspect. I think we just have to be aware that there is some danger of emotional exaggeration, which can actually manifest as financial exaggeration. And another small aspect is Mercury decile Jupiter. You see, there's Mercury at 16 Aries, there's Jupiter at 22 Taurus. In fact, we could argue that it's really Mercury's decile, really the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. So 36 degrees apart. And I think it's like we're trying to create something with our mind. It's a creative aspect. Creative as in deliberately creative. With our mind trying to create a sense of freedom and perhaps even rebellion. And using our mind, we get involved in this struggle to create change and freedom, and we believe that we can actually do it with our brain and we can actually pull it off. I think in some ways we can. And I think that if we stand up, speak up for ourselves and what we believe in, I think we can actually have a major impact. And, that is another reason with this moon in Libra conjunct with South Node. It's tempting to want to keep everyone happy, but really what we really want to do is be heard and see if we can use the power of our mind to create a new situation for us, perhaps for ourselves, and perhaps for other people as well. Another reminder, and one other thing I should point out, last weekend, sort of yesterday, we had Sun square Pluto. The Sun square, the square between Sun and Pluto is still very much in operation. And I think that square between Sun and Pluto is important. Pluto has recently gone into Aquarius. I think in January, was it January the 19th? Pluto goes into Aquarius. So when the Sun squares that Pluto, that is a reminder that Pluto has gone into Aquarius. Sun square Pluto in fixed signs. It's about wanting to express our individuality, perhaps. About wanting to tell the world who we are and holding on to things. If we believe in something, then that's it. We want to hold on to those beliefs. And we can be very stubborn about it. And if it's not us being stubborn, it can be someone else being stubborn. And overall, with this Sun square Pluto, we may see something of a power struggle. Looking at things from a heliocentric perspective, it's what I've been talking about for a couple of days now. So I'm not going to show you anything that you really haven't seen before. If you have been watching these videos over the last couple of days, so don't expect to be amazed by anything. You've seen this chart before, but it's just a reminder of what's going on from a heliocentric perspective. So this is the position of a planet from a heliocentric view. Remember, heliocentric means putting the sun at the center of the solar system where it should be. And heliocentrically, we have Mercury opposition Jupiter. and Mercury is now applying to a square of Mars. And so this is arguably the peak of this T-square coming up. Mercury opposition Jupiter, arguably opposition Uranus as well. You've got Mars on the T, and I think this heliocentric T-square is potentially quite violent, and I think we have to bear in mind geocentrically we've got the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. In fact, heliocentrically we've also got a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Could be about people wanting their freedom. It could just be about violent events. We are living in a violent world, and perhaps we need to look at the omens. One thinks of Calpurnia and Julius Caesar, talking about all these omens, lionesses giving birth on the street and that kind of thing. It's a sign, perhaps, of the beginning. But summer is here. Summer is here. Maybe it's now is the summer of our discontent, to continue on the Shakespeare theme. I think there is a case for that. I think the summer is going to be when things really maybe start to go wrong. But more of that later, much later. Maybe I'm not going to go into it today. But the heliocentric chart is there, and it's quite strong. That T-square should not be underestimated, and we are living in violent times, and we need to see what's going on now. How this affects us as individuals, I don't know. When I was talking about, when I mentioned the Mars heliocentric Uranus square, someone on the comments mentioned that they cut themselves when that Mars Uranus square was exact. Maybe that was a coincidence, and people do cut themselves. That this commenter shows, she doesn't usually cut herself. This is a rare event, and so with Mars Jupiter square, Mercury opposition Jupiter, we need to be a bit careful what we say. Perhaps some of us might say things that we weren't really meaning to say, and it could cause a bit of upset. Maybe it's right to cause upset. Mercury is, it's like Mercury is the way we communicate. Maybe with Mercury opposition Jupiter, we're plugged into the cosmos. And if we're plugged into the cosmos, some of us might find ourselves expressing what other people don't want to express or don't even want to hear about. But that's the heliocentric position today. And what I want to do now is look at the astrology from the perspective of the 12 signs. So let's go into the 12 signs. Let's do my forecast of the 12 signs. Go back to the geocentric position. Okay, these are my forecasts for my forecast of the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, April the 22nd, 2024. Aries, it's okay to be an Aries. All of those traits of being an Aries are perhaps coming out into the open now, even though the sun has moved out of your sign. Because Mercury and Venus are opposition the moon, and Mercury and Venus are pretty close to the North Node. This is what you're supposed to be doing. This is how you are supposed to be acting, and how you're supposed to be acting is Aries, North Node in Aries. Being assertive, telling people what you think, resisting the pressure to compromise and just make everyone happy for the sake of it. Okay, the pressure is certainly there. If the North Node is in Aries, the South Node is going to be in Libra, and the South Node is going to be conjunct the Moon. There is going to be a bit of pressure to conform, to tell people what they want, to be nice. I mean, I suppose some of us want a quiet world. Even if you're an Aries, there are times when you want a quiet world. But you know, Aries, that really that is not the right way forward. You have to say it as it is, with Mercury conjunct the North Node in Aries. And I think also, Aries, you're starting to get some of your mental focus back. It may have been lost a little over the last week or two, and that's because Mercury has been going retrograde in your sign. And Mercury is still retrograde, yes, but Mercury is slowing down now. In a few days' time, Mercury will be direct. And so if Mercury is going to be direct, that means, Aries, you can be even more direct yourself. And be as direct as you can be. Okay, I understand that there are limitations. You've got to consider the restrictions around you, but be realistic about those restrictions. I mean, some of those restrictions might just be in your head. And I must emphasize, you can't be friends with everyone. I know society wants us to be nice to everyone, but you cannot be friends with everyone. And with the moon moving through Libra, Libra represents the other, represents another person, can represent enemies. And you're very aware of the other person. And you're very aware of the pressures being placed upon you by another person. And if the moon was not conjunct the South Node, I would be saying, well, yeah, sure, you be nice. There's nothing wrong with a bit of compromise. But because the moon is conjunct the South Node, I'm telling you that compromise and being nice for the sake of it is not the right way forward. You do have to be ready to firmly express yourself. And also, you need to consider all the things holding you back and what might be holding you back. And as the week starts, Aries, you might feel a little irritated with the way you are being treated by authority. Authority, bureaucracies, governments, if you're waiting for something or you're waiting for cooperation from large, I suppose it could be private organizations, but could be municipalities, whatever. You're just aware of that maybe some organizations or someone is really dragging their feet, and this could be making you annoyed. And I think you need to get that in perspective. I would not get crazily annoyed about how an organization or a government is treating you, because it may be just a situation where short term there is nothing you can do about it, and you perhaps maybe have to wait a few days for Mercury to turn direct. So that is a possibility. So if you do find that your life is being messed around by a government or a large organization, sure, assert yourself as much as possible, but don't go too far in asserting yourself in that particular situation. I'm not talking about one-to-one relationships or people in your daily life. I'm talking about organizations. It just may be that things are just really slow if you try to get in touch with them, and if you try to complain, just be really slow. So don't get angry. Do what you can, but don't build it up and don't let it spoil your day. That's something I just need to say for Aries. And Finally, brief word about relationships, close relationships. With the moon opposition Mercury, moon opposition Venus, particularly if you are in the Americas, it may be some of the people close to you are being too emotional, being inappropriately emotional. And I would suggest that maybe you don't get tempted. There's a difference between being assertive and getting your way and being emotional feelings. It's good to use the power of your personality to get your way, but getting emotional, particularly if another person is involved, I'm not convinced that's going to be constructive. And so when dealing with people one-to-one, you need to kind of steer them away from excessive displays of emotion, because I don't think that would be particularly constructive. Taurus. Well, Taurus, you are enjoying now the sun moving into your sign. Okay, I know the sun moved into your sign. Was it Friday? It's been in Taurus for a couple of days now. But it's the beginning of a week. I don't know. I regard the week as starting on Monday, not on Sunday. So it's the beginning of a week, in my opinion. And you've got the sun in Taurus. And if you're looking at these horoscopes from the point of view of your sun sign, then we can say that your birthday season has started. Indeed, you might have had a birthday over the last couple of days. And the sun, when it moves into Taurus, it makes a square to Pluto. I talked about this square to Pluto when I was looking at your weekend. I pointed out that there was a sun square Pluto, I think. But I need to talk about it again, because it's still a major theme. And sun square Pluto, you might regard it as being a difficult aspect, but in a Taurian world, the sun is in your sign. Pluto is in Aquarius. It's a high-profile sign, and so sun square Pluto gives you the dynamic push in order to actually make things happen. And you can start to really slowly grind towards the achievement of some of your aims. And don't underestimate your power. And with power, it may be a bit of a zero-sum situation with this sun square Pluto. It's not like everyone can have their power. Everyone can have power. There's only a certain amount of power available. And if you've got power, that means someone else doesn't have power. And you need to make sure that someone else who's got the power is you. Because if you are not asserting your power, that means someone else is. So that is quite a competitive environment to be in. But I think things are going your way, and I'm confident that you can really assert yourself in quite a dramatic way, but not in a way that necessarily needs immediate results. The key thing is you're moving towards your goals, and that's really what matters. And so Taurus, it's just important that you keep moving. And if you decide that something is important, then hold on to it and don't allow yourself to be shifted. Though what you mustn't do, Taurus, is be distracted by details, particularly social details. You might think, you've got to do something, but then you look at your social environment and you think, well, I've got to please this person, and I don't want to upset that person, and I've got to take into account him and her and all of that, and that kind of thing. And if you were to do that, you could be ground to a halt. You cannot spend too much time worrying about what other people think. Especially Moon opposition Venus today. Moon opposition Venus can be about other people bringing things to a halt through their emotions and through their complaints and through their distractions, and you try to take into account what they're all doing, and you end up getting absolutely nowhere. I really think that you need to consider that. And also, you don't want today anyone trying to play the authority card with you. Someone might try to do that. You're trying to do something, you think you're making progress, and someone suddenly says you can't do it, and they try to evoke some authority, and by evoking authority they try to delay you. Sure, listen to what they say, but don't listen to them too much, because Taurus, you've got things to do. Gemini. Today, Gemini, the moon is making an opposition to Mercury. And because of this opposition to Mercury, you may take yourself slightly too seriously. And that does need to be explained. I think one of the problems with being a Gemini, and I'm speaking as a Gemini, is that we can take ourselves and our creative genius a little bit too seriously. We might even think we're special. And today in particular, we might think we're special. We might think that what we're doing, what we're planning on doing, and our creativity is the thing that really matters, and we don't have to take into account what's going on out there. I think that is a dangerous approach. It's not because we're not creative. It's not because we're not clever, but if we don't take into account other things, then everything we're trying to achieve could be for nothing. And we have to make a special effort to look at the broader picture. And actually to be rational. Geminis actually pride themselves on how rational they are and how they don't get caught up in sort of primitive emotion. But, today there is some danger of getting caught up in primitive emotion. And again, I'm saying that as a Gemini. It can happen. And we might, think we're being really clever, but in fact we're not being clever at all. It's just mainly emotional hot air that's disguised as something clever. And to safeguard this, we must be ready to listen. Listen just to the people around us. These people don't have to be really close to us. They could just be friends, associates, whatever. And listen to what they have to say. And because what they're saying is important. And I think that you need to take an interest in what other people are doing. So perhaps what you need to do, Gemini, is to take your creativity and be ready to share it and use it in a constructive sense with other people. Because when you're doing it with other people, there's always feedback, and it gets grounded. And I think in that sense, you can be useful. But just remember, Gemini, it's not all about you. But Gemini, you can make a big impression today. After all, Mercury, which is your ruler, which is conjunct the North Node, by the way, is decile Jupiter. Mercury, Jupiter, 36 degrees apart, a tenth of the circle. This decile Jupiter, which, as I said in the intro, when I was talking about the overall planetary situation, is this decile involves Uranus as well, because really Mercury is pretty close to the decile of Uranus, and the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. This Mercury decile, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, will allow you to show the world who you are. But remember, it's showing the world. It's not doing anything private, anything that is private, but anything that is self-indulgent. It's taking the power of your mind and your vision, and okay, it's going to be a bit of a struggle, but you can express it. And I think that people will listen to you, particularly if you can catch people slightly by surprise. If you're talking all the time, and you say something, then it's just more words. But if you express yourself after a period of silence, then I think that you're going to be particularly impressive. And when the words flow, when you're also really engaging people, understanding what people want, and you're showing that you're different, that you've got a vision, but also that you've got a vision that you're prepared to share. Once people realize that you're not just being selfish, but you're presenting something that can be shared, then I think they will really listen to you. Cancer. Today, Cancer, the moon is in Libra and it's conjunct the South Node. And that is perhaps something that needs to be talked about. The moon, obviously, Cancer, is your ruler. It's very important to you, and it's in Libra. And I think that with moon in Libra, Cancer, you probably want a quiet life at some level. You don't want to have arguments. You don't want to have disagreements. What's that German phrase? It's Sturm und Drang or something. I don't even know what it means, but all that drama. That's not what you want. You want a quiet life, but is it the right thing? That's what you've got to ask yourself. Just because something feels comfortable doesn't mean that it's right. And that might seem counterintuitive, because Cancer is often about getting its feelings right. Cancer has powerful feelings, is very sensitive, and usually if Cancer feels that something is right, then it is right. But today that might not be the case. What feels comfortable may be inappropriate, and you may be ignoring what you have to do, what you're supposed to be doing. And I suppose by saying that you're supposed to be doing something, I'm saying that in order to develop, you're supposed to be going in a particular direction, and it goes back to this idea that the North Node is in Aries, and Aries is a high-profile sign. And from a Cancer perspective, it is a position of leadership. I've said this before, I'll say it again. But I think that there is just this feeling, Cancer, that you just want to turn your back on responsibility because it just seems to be too much. But if you were to turn your back on responsibility, would you really be making your world a lot more comfortable? There is an opposition between the Moon and Mercury. And it's not just an opposition between Moon and Mercury. It's the Moon conjunct the South Node, opposition Mercury conjunct the North Node. If you pretend that opposition doesn't exist, then you're going to get disturbed and messed up anyway. You're going to get involved in arguments. You're going to feel tense. You're going to feel that, you're going to look at what people are doing and you're going to say, no, that's wrong. And so you might as well be there directing things right from the beginning, because that way you can sidestep the argument and you can start to move things in the way they should be moving. And that is the advantage of leadership. And because if you're in a position of leadership, then you have a sense of your own responsibility. And if things don't work out, then you've only got yourself to blame. But you can forestall an issue, you can forestall an argument by making sure you are there before the problem starts. And that's perhaps what today is all about, being there before the problem starts. And in that way, I think you can have a relatively harmonious and satisfying Monday. Leo, the Sun is your ruler, and the Sun is square Pluto. And I think that could be a useful aspect, provided you handle it in the right way. So the Sun, being your ruler, is in Taurus. It's about your general sense of direction. Taurus, you feel quite confident that you should be going in a particular direction. And now it's a Monday. The working week has started. Businesses are open, etc. You have even more of an impetus to really, make things happen and to work towards your goals. But it's not going to be entirely easy, because the Sun makes a square to Pluto. Now, that Sun square Pluto may mean that someone is dragging their feet. They don't want you to go in the direction you want to go. They're being very stubborn and obsessed, and they're trying to hold you back. And you have to decide how to deal with the situation. Do you take the view that someone is making a valid point? This is someone that you need to take on board, that you need to persuade them? Or do you take the view that someone is just being deliberately difficult? That is a possibility. Or is it in your imagination? And so you have to decide how to deal with whatever it is that is holding you back, because I do think that something is holding you back, and there's no point in denying it. But I think you can understand it. And once you understand what's going on and define at what level it's happening, you'll be in a position to actually make sense of a situation and make progress. And there are, as I said, three main possibilities. Someone is holding you back and they've got a point and you need to listen to them. Someone is holding you back because they're just being stubborn. Or no one is holding you back, but it's something in your mind. So which is it? Work it out. Three possibilities. And that's really the main theme of the day. I would not, Leo, overthink things. There is that danger today, overthinking. You might think you're being analytical and intelligent when you're overthinking, but ask yourself how you're overthinking. And if you're honest with yourself, you'll actually accept that you're not actually overthinking at all. You're actually overfeeling. And that these thoughts and concerns are actually, they're not thoughts, they've got a deep emotional basis, and an emotional basis which may not be particularly constructive. And instead, you need to be thinking, not thinking at all. You just need to be knowing that there is a broad picture out there, and that the broad picture is telling you where you need to be going, and that feeds back into this Sun square Pluto. You have a clear sense of direction. It's not going to be 100% easy to find this direction and to make successful initiatives, but if you're honest with yourself and you're honest with the world around you, then soon enough you're going to start making excellent progress. Virgo, just to tell you, Mercury is about to go stationary direct, and when Mercury's been retrograde for a few weeks, and if you're a Virgo, that can take its toll, can't it? It can make you feel that it's just really difficult to get things done. But don't worry, Mercury is changing direction. In a few days' time, you're going to find that it's much easier to really get things done. And as far as today is concerned, there are certainly going to be, I think, a few frustrations. It may be, Virgo, that you get overly concerned about money and the cost of things. I understand that money is important, but you mustn't, Virgo, allow financial considerations to dominate the agenda. You need to move beyond money and the price of things. If an action is the right thing to do for you, then money is not the issue. There's always a way of doing something, and it can always, 9 times out of 10, be done for free or virtually free, if it's important. So really bear that in mind, and you need to sometimes dig deep into your resources. Again, I'm not talking about material resources. And allow yourself, Virgo, to just be able to take the initiative. And things like money should not be preventing you from taking the initiative. That's just an excuse. And with Mercury, your ruler, it's conjunct the North Node. That is really telling you to do something, and also to exercise your power. And you're going to be helped by a decile aspect between Mercury, which is your ruler, and the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. That is really about your will. You have an idea. It's a very deep idea. It may feel that it's something that you can't really communicate, but actually you can communicate it if you try. And deep down you have a genuine vision of what it means to be free, what it means to be yourself. And it's a vision that, if you really make the effort, there's a little bit of effort. If you make the effort, that is something that you really can express. So Virgo, it's just very important to not to doubt yourself, and it's also important that you don't allow fairly irrelevant material details to get in your way. Libra. The moon continues moving through your sign, and in some ways that is a good thing. I mean, when the moon is moving through your sign, you feel a certain sense of comfort. You're in the right place, and you may enjoy things that are rooted in the past. I think the past is going to be more important today than usual. And that's nice. It's always good to have memories. I don't know, to look at old family photographs, photographs of you 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. That's nice, but you mustn't dwell on the past. And you need to accept that the world has changed. And if you try to do things like you did in the past, then don't be surprised if they don't work out, because the old ways are not necessarily the best ways. And what you must be ready to do is start to align yourself more with the future. And in order to understand the future, it is, I think, necessary to communicate and to listen to what other people are saying. You don't even have to know these people. Just I don't know, you might be on, public transport. I know that would be, the underground or the bus. Just listening to what someone is saying. Of course, you may not take public transport, but just listening to what someone is saying, what a stranger is saying, listening to what they're talking about. And just by listening to that, you might just get some really valid information about the world in which you're living. But it's not just about strangers. Do talk to people and hear what they're saying, because you might be challenged. And I think you might realize that you have perhaps in some ways got things wrong. Not badly wrong, but you've just been a little too rooted in the past, and some adjustments now need to be made, and you're able to make those adjustments very easily. And at the same time, Libra, I think that your ability to get on with people is actually very good, not just on a one-to-one level, but on a collective level. You can mix with people, share your abilities, and also listen to what other people are saying, and listen and focus on what other people are good at. Because people are good at lots of different things, and you can actually benefit from other people's abilities, and at the same time you can help foster them. And it may be that you can create some sense of community around a particular set of talents. So that is something that you need to think about. But in the process, you must allow yourself to be surprised. And that's what I was saying when I said at the beginning of this piece on Libra. You mustn't dwell too much on yourself and the way things were in the past. It's through surprise that you can make progress. So you go out into the world and something happens, or you hear something that, to begin with, just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't accord with the way you're planning on doing things, but it's a surprise, maybe even a shock. But it's through that surprise and that shock, Libra, that you can actually make progress. So it's really important that you're open-minded, and that you're not too rigid about your about your plans and your attitudes, because I think there needs to be a little bit of a change. But I don't want to over-dramatize it. I think if you're ready to listen, if you're able to be honest with yourself, then I think today can be pretty constructive. Scorpio, you possibly you possibly shouldn't be trying to do too much today. Scorpio, I think you may not have quite as much energy as you'd like to have, and you may take the view that it's best to just hold back a bit, and that's fine. But Scorpio, it's important that you don't dwell too much in one place. And I'm thinking particularly on an emotional level, because if you stay in one place, you strangely have maximum instability. How does that work? Well, you can go with the tide, you can go with the flow, but if you're just, I don't know, hanging on to something, you find something, or maybe you find a group of people that you find are reassuring and you just hang on there. Your attempts to hang on are hard work because things are changing all the time. And if you think that one or two people are going to give you stability and peace of mind, and you ignore the rest of the world, then in a way that's a recipe for instability. And it's better if you accept the instability of the world in which you're living, and that you try to make sense of it. For sure, you try to make sense of it, and you start to create structures in order to maintain your position, but structures which are always flexible. They've got to be flexible. I think that is really important. So you need imaginative reorganization. Imaginative and flexible reorganization may be what is required today. And you shouldn't expect too much from outside organizations. So if you're having to deal with these organizations, I was telling Aries a similar thing. You shouldn't expect outside organizations to help, whether they be public organizations, private organizations, particularly large organizations, and also people in authority in general are going to drag their feet, and they may be less than helpful. So if you were planning on interacting with public or private organizations today, then maybe you should think twice. Maybe you should put it on hold. It may have something to do with Mercury going retrograde. There can be great delay, particularly if you believe in astrology, like me. There can be great delay while Mercury is retrograde, and things don't actually move until Mercury goes direct. So don't be surprised if that happens. And I suppose this also applies if you are working in an organization. In fact, it probably especially applies if you're working in an organization. Scorpio, you may feel that you don't have as much control as you'd like to have. It seems that there are just outside forces that have to be taken into account. and you're not particularly happy about the situation. You don't want to adapt, and you might actually become quite stubborn. And then you might become a little stuck. So if you are working today, then by all means stick to your principles, but you must not be rooted to the spot, because you fundamentally you don't have quite as much power as you'd like to have. This is a temporary situation. Don't worry about it. And so do allow yourself a little bit of flexibility. Don't feel that you have to be in control all the time. And as I've just said, it is a temporary situation. The situation is going to improve, and in the short term, just make sure that your little part of the world is properly organized, but also that you're forward thinking. So whatever organization you try to make today, make sure that organization can deal with changes which must inevitably happen over the next few days and weeks. I think you know what these changes are, so that underlies the importance of having a certain amount of flexibility. Sorry, Scorpio, I wasn't more positive. I would like to have been more positive, but tomorrow's another day. In fact, I think tomorrow the moon goes into your sign, Scorpio, so that should bring quite a big change in its wake. Sagittarius, you're in quite a friendly, sociable mood. New week, new people to interact with. It all seems great. But don't take things too far. If you spend too much time with other people, talking to other people, gossiping, whatever, you'll soon realize that essentially you're wasting your time and that you're actually going in the wrong direction. Because actually today you should be thinking about yourself. I mean, yourself is what matters. You're the one, in many respects, who has the ability. And it's a time to make the most of this ability and to structure it. Raw ability, raw talent on its own is not quite enough. It needs to be grounded. And a bit of work in that direction would, I think, be extremely useful. And while this is going on, I think, Sagittarius, you could be quite sensitive, and whether or not this sensitivity is a good thing, well, it kind of depends, doesn't it? I know, because this is an astrology channel, that people watching this channel, they would tend to believe in spiritual, psychic stuff as well as astrology, and there is an openness to that. And from a psychic perspective, I think that your psychic abilities are going to be at the top of a range. So in that sense, it is good that you have this sensitivity. You can pick up on things, thoughts, feelings. Maybe telepathy. It could be maybe even premonitions about the future. So there's a lot of stuff coming your way, Sagittarius. And while that is a good thing, you have to make sure, Sagittarius, that you can sort it out. It all has to be processed. Very often, the information comes in, but it's it's all messed up, and it sometimes gets mixed up with one's own unconscious chattering, and in the end one can't make the most of one's psychic insights. So you need to work out how best to understand what is happening. And one thing you mustn't do is try too hard to think logically about the world and other people and what is normal. Because if you try too hard to think about other people and what is normal and what is correct, then you are not fully, you're not taking advantage of what you're picking up. You need to just look at the information that's coming your way, and in a way be very matter of fact about it. After all, Jupiter is in Taurus. So Jupiter in Taurus often takes things literally. Taurus in general takes things literally as a sign. Jupiter, ruler of Sagittarius, is in Taurus. This is a time when you're perhaps a bit more literal than usual. So when you're picking up loads of information at an intuitive psychic level, you don't want to restrict that information by running a script. This can't be true, this must be true, all that kind of thing. It's probably okay to take it absolutely literally. But where there is a psychic opportunity, there is always an emotional danger. That's the way it is. And psychic stuff aside, today there is scope for misunderstanding things. It's not really psychic aside, it's all part of the whole thing. There is a process of completely misunderstanding what's going on, getting the wrong end of a stick, and when you're talking to people, giving the wrong impression. Maybe you're using too many words. Maybe you're using the wrong words. And so with Jupiter, your ruler, remember, it's in Taurus. Okay, it's been in Taurus for a year almost. With Jupiter in Taurus, be very clear. That's how the Taurus energy is supposed to be. Don't use too many words. Be absolutely down to earth in what you're saying and use simple words. And in that way, Sagittarius, I think that you will get your message across. And finally, I should say something about close relationships. Mercury is decile Jupiter. Jupiter's your ruler. Mercury rules Gemini, which is your opposite sign. So with Mercury decile Jupiter, that is about imagining perhaps what kind of relationship you'd like to be in with someone. And so there's you and there's someone else, and it doesn't need to be a close relationship. Whatever that relationship is, have a thought in your head about how you'd like that relationship to be, and then express that thought and see what happens, because the results might be interesting. Capricorn, your temptation is to just express yourself, express yourself in a fairly materialistic way, and in perhaps in quite an authoritative way, thinking that you have authority, that you would like to express your authority, and that seems to be the right thing to do, at least on the first pass. But I'm not sure if it is the right thing to do. I think, Capricorn, you need to make a greater effort to make sure that your own position is as secure as possible. Now, that's obvious for a Capricorn, surely, to be thinking that one's grounding is all sorted out. We expect Capricorn to have sorted that out already. But it seems that at some level, Capricorn, things aren't quite as grounded as they should be, and some work is required. And it may be that it's a situation where you should avoid criticizing or other people, or even asserting authority over other people, because you just don't have the facts, and maybe you don't have the security, and you don't even, maybe may not even have the confidence. So the first thing you need to do, Capricorn, today is to make absolutely sure that your own grounding and the basis for any authority you might have is totally secure. And that may mean that you need to do some thinking and some planning and some work on yourself. And it may well be that there is an information deficit. By an information deficit, I mean there are certain things you should know about that you don't know about. And it's not a big deal. You can close this gap pretty quickly. And maybe that's something you need to do today. Find out about something. If you don't know the answer and don't know an answer, get the facts. Talk to someone. Talk to someone who maybe knows more than you. There are people who know more than you about particular subjects. And so seek those people out, or of course use the internet, whatever you feel is appropriate. That, I think, is what you should be doing. So broad message is sort out yourself first before addressing yourself to the wider world. Aquarius. It's nice that the moon continues to move through Libra. I mean, after all, Aquarius is an air sign. Recently, there hasn't been much going on in air signs, and so it's a bit of a relief when we have the moon in Libra. But don't overthink things. I think there is a danger, Aquarius, that you start to think in terms of broad concepts. You start working out what your broad philosophy on life is. It's sometimes so comforting, isn't it, to have a philosophy. To sign up to a cause or a political party and say, "Oh, that's it. I'm sorted out. I know what I believe in." Okay. Aquarians don't really want to commit themselves to anything. At least if it's from the outside world, they'll commit themselves to their own things, but they want to be independent-minded, don't they? But it may not be a good idea to be getting too hung up on particular concepts because you haven't sorted out the facts. And it's a similar thing to what I was saying to Capricorn. I was telling Capricorn that Capricorn needed to do more research. Capricorn needs to make sure that it's got its facts straight. I'd say a similar thing to you, Aquarius. So it's not really about grounding. It's about grounding in the sense of intellectual grounding. You cannot have a broad philosophy if the little factual details haven't been worked out, because very often a whole philosophy can collapse if one fact is wrong. So it's just very important that you focus on the facts and you make sure that all of the facts are in order. And there are many ways in which you can get hold of the facts. And these facts can just, you can just pick them up by just being there through osmosis. Just stop, do nothing, think, allow some of these facts to just come into your sphere. The facts are all around you if you look hard enough, or indeed if you're prepared to accept them. I mean, some people just don't want to have anything to do with the facts because perhaps they find the facts threatening. As far as relationships are concerned, the Sun rules Leo, and the Sun, Leo, is your opposite sign. And so the Sun does have a fairly special role in terms of Aquarian relationships. And as you're probably aware, the Sun is now in Taurus. And Taurus can be quite a stubborn sign. And so some of the people close to you are really quite set in their ways, perhaps even more set in their ways than you are. And that Sun in Taurus is making a square to Pluto. And you must therefore accept that some people are stubborn. You can't just persuade them to do things your way because they're just not going to listen. And if you're not careful, there could be a power struggle. And I'm not just talking about, romantic partners or spouses. I'm talking about all your one-to-one connections, wherever they might be. There is a sense of stubbornness, and you shouldn't try to push people into changing their mind, because I don't think you're going to be successful. And therefore, Aquarius, I think it's going to be very important to show some respect and maybe to understand that your way of looking at the world is not the only way of looking at the world, and that there are other ways of looking at the world which are just as valid and perhaps even more valid. Pisces, it's a day when I think you're going to be quite sensitive. You're going to be picking up on a great deal, and maybe you're going to be picking up on too much. I mean, that's a standard thing that's often said to Pisces, isn't it? Pisces is connected with the sea and with the ocean, like a fish swimming in the big sea, and all sorts of stuff is coming your way. And yes, Pisces, you will be picking up on an enormous amount, and you are very sensitive right now. Don't be too sensitive, or rather, don't take your sensitivity too seriously. Because if you take your sensitivity too seriously, you may take the view that it's all too much, when really you need to be a little more down to earth. If you feel something and you find yourself drifting too much into your own feelings, then those feelings need to be released. And maybe that's about talking to someone, telling them how you feel, what you've just thought. So if you have some fear or something's occurred to you, in many cases, I don't think you should keep it to yourself. I mean, after all, the Mercury, the communication planet, is conjunct the North Node. It's in Aries. Just tell people what's on your mind. Isn't it the right that aren't psychotherapists supposed to have therapy themselves at regular intervals? Because they're, all this stuff they're building up from clients, and it just gets too much, and every now and then they have to do a dump, and explaining, telling someone what's on their mind and what's bothering them. And perhaps it's a similar situation. It's a similar situation here. It just gets to be all too much, and you need to discuss with people what you're picking up, and you may then get some feedback which is very useful, and you may find that you're just over-exaggerating. And so, yes, Pisces, I don't think that you should take things too seriously. And That doesn't mean, though, that you aren't very sensitive. I think you are very sensitive. You're picking up on a huge amount of stuff, much more than usual. And in certain situations, indeed in many situations, this is probably a good thing. On an emotional level, there are going to be few things you miss. When you meet people, you're going to have an understanding pretty quickly of who they are, what's going through their mind, and what's going on through their heart. It's there. The information is available for you. But there is this question about how you actually deal with the information. And just make sure that you just don't let it build up. And at regular intervals, it might be a good idea to get confirmation. So if you're feeling that something is the case, and it really feels strongly that something is the case, every now and then check it, see if it's right, ask a few questions. Just tell someone, do you feel this? Is it the case that this is going through your mind? Ask them. Are you not feeling happy even? I don't know, it depends on the situation, but get some feedback, because by simply doing that, you're going to feel much more secure in terms of what you're doing. And Pisces, don't be afraid of, in general, talking and talking about your ideas. I think that talking is going to make you feel a lot better. Just short conversations. Maybe if you feel you need to maybe call someone, if you've got a phone, call someone up, have a 5-minute conversation. Talking is the way forward. Things need to be talked through, and if you've got a choice between ruminating and talking, then you should do the talking, and the feeling has to be balanced with talking. Feeling on its own without communication could really grind you down. So that's the way forward, Pisces, I think. Sorry if I've used, been a little bit negative, if I've used the odd inappropriate expression, but that's it, Pisces. That's my view. But the more you say, I think, the better it's going to be. That's the astrology, and I now want to look at today, Monday, from the perspective of the I Ching. And I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? Just a reminder there, you don't have to watch the I Ching segment. If you don't want an I Ching forecast, then you don't have to have one. You can just skip or the next section, or indeed just watch someone else, watch another YouTube video. So the first hexagram I got was hexagram 34, which is the power of the great. This is telling us that we do actually have a lot of power at our disposal. More power than we realized. And it may even be quite an overwhelming amount of power. That maybe everything that we are is now sort of mounting up, and it's getting stronger and stronger. And the I Ching actually uses the imagery of perhaps a wild animal. I think it may be a ram or some aggressive, assertive wild animal that's finally found its moment and is just ready to go. And the encouragement, there's real encouragement to take action. And maybe this is connected, North Node in Aries, or is it Mercury conjunct North Node in Aries? We've just had the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction over the weekend, and we're just ready. And we get a moving line, and the fifth line moves. And with the fifth line moves, it's saying that we can move beyond stubbornness. People who are stubborn are often weak, because you're stubborn because you have doubts about your own ability to act, your own ability to get things done. So you have to make a big show of being stubborn. If you are genuinely strong, you don't have to be stubborn, do you? You can just be yourself. And so it's telling us that we can move beyond stubbornness. We don't have to be stubborn. We don't have to make a big fuss about it, saying, I want to do this, not that. There is this temptation to be stubborn, because remember, the Sun is square Pluto. Sun in Taurus, square Pluto. Sun is in a fixed sign, Taurus. Pluto, Aquarius, fixed sign. That can be about stubbornness, but that's Sun-Pluto square is telling us to move beyond that. We don't have to be stubborn, because stubbornness, as I said, is a sign of weakness, and we can really start to just be ourselves, and this wild force can sort of come out into the open. And fifth line moves, and this line moves, this hexagram moves to hexagram 43, which is breakthrough. And on the surface, that kind of seems to be a similar pattern, doesn't it? We've got all of this energy mounting up in us, in ourselves, and then there needs to be a breakthrough. But what does breakthrough actually mean? If you actually look at what the I Ching is saying, it's actually talking about there may be some danger here. And it may be about being aware that we're in a difficult situation. So we've had this power of the great building up. We're in a really strong position. We are strong. And now we're in a strong position, we realize when we look at the world around us that things are not great. But we may be actually in a situation that we need to get out. And that if we don't get out now, then there could be problems. But we are in a position to get out. And the I Ching talks about the cries of the prisoners. And this is talking about it from a military perspective. It's like some members of our army have already been captured, and we can hear their cries. And so we've not been captured. So what do? We get out, because we can already hear that other people are under stress. Maybe this is about insights about the economy. It could be something else going on closer to home, but we can already see that other people are being stressed out by this, are being perhaps damaged, maybe economically, by something. And if we leave it any longer, we're going to get damaged ourselves. And so we have this opportunity to escape. And that is what breakthrough is. And it goes back to the power of the great. We have the strength to take action, and we can escape from a difficult situation and, live to fight another day. At least that's what the I Ching seems to be suggesting. Okay, I'm now going to turn to the astrology, and I think it was on Friday, there was this self-immolation of Max Azzarello, this happened just before the Jupiter-Saturn, just before the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And let's have a look now at the chart for the immolation. So, as I understand it, Maxwell Azzarello, he was 37 years old. I think his mother had died in 2022, and apparently he was really upset by the fact that his mother died, and he was very much involved in conspiracy theories, and it reached a point where he went to the outside the courtroom, I think, where Donald Trump was being on trial for whatever, this $130,000, Stormy Daniels, etc. And he set himself on fire, and he was critically injured, and he later died. And I wanted to consider his chart. I also wanted to consider what was going on when he set himself on fire. Now, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, for some reason, is associated with self-immolation. It has been in the past. January the 4th, 2011, the Arab Spring, there was a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on that day. And that was the day when a market vendor set himself on fire. When in January 1969, Jan Palach in Prague, in protest against the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia, he set himself on fire. So there is this certain association with Jupiter-Uranus and setting oneself on fire. And so in the run-up to the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, this Max Azzarello set himself on fire, and this is the time he did it. And there are a couple of things to notice about this chart. There is the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Just applying. Jupiter was 6 minutes from the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, so it was really close. And then look at Mars. Mars was at 2134 Pisces. So Mars was exactly sextile Jupiter and exactly sextile Uranus, and it was in the 8th house. This is a reminder that Mars-Jupiter contacts, even sextiles, are not necessarily fortunate. And we can see Mars is in the 8th house. So Mars in the 8th house, well, that is a house of death. And it seems that Mars sextile Jupiter, Mars is a planet of energy. Jupiter, I don't know, is some vision, some broad idea, even if it's all about conspiracy theories. Mars sextile Jupiter, it had an impact on Max Azzarello, and this is when he did what he did. And at the same time as this, look at the Sun and the Moon. The Sun has just got into Taurus. I mean, that's a kind of thing to do with Sun in Taurus. You know, the Sun in Taurus, just, I'm going to do it. If Taurus says they're going to do something, take them seriously. Sun in Taurus, people say, I'm going to do it. They're joking. No, it's not joking. He's going to do it. There's a Sun-Moon trine. So what is the midpoint between the Sun and Jupiter? So the midpoint, the Sun-Moon midpoint is approximately 6 or 7 Cancer, off the top of my head. And that means that Jupiter and Uranus were semi-square the Sun-Moon midpoint. In other words, Jupiter and Uranus were aspecting the Sun-Moon midpoint at the time of this self-immolation. Sounds positive, but we're dealing with Jupiter-Uranus. And so I'm afraid that kind of fits what he did. This was, I don't know, for him, I don't know, some kind of liberation, expressing his freedom. That's how he expressed his freedom. Jupiter-Uranus semi-squares the Sun-Moon midpoint. And it is just a further reminder that the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is associated, the link with self-immolation. But I hope we're not going to see any more self-immolations. But just going back to the beginning of the Arab Spring, January the 4th, 2011, I suppose I should just show you the chart of the Arab Spring. This is the moment, by the way, that the vendor, I should know his name, but set himself on fire on January the 4th, 2011. There's the Jupiter-Uranus in conjunction. You see, 2702 Pisces Jupiter, 2702 Pisces Uranus. So that's Jupiter-Uranus and the self-immolation. There are some other things going on in the chart. Mars is conjunct the Saturn-Neptune midpoint in the 8th house. I suppose you think about the fear there, and I mean, a lot of people were very upset. Plus Mars on the Saturn-Neptune. I wonder what Alfred Witter says about Mars on the Saturn-Neptune. I'm not saying it's going to fit. Alfred Witter in his Rules for Planetary Pictures. Mars on the Saturn Neptune, he says, plans which are not carried through, injuries which heal very slowly. Well, yes, injuries which heal very slowly. Well, in this case, injuries which don't heal at all. And I think he died 10 hours later. And if you're into hypothetical planets, the Sun and Saturn were on the ascendant Hades midpoint. If you're interested in hypotheticals, I'm not going to go into that. But what about Maxwell Azzarello's horoscope? I'm not saying that Maxwell Azzarello's chart makes a great deal of sense to me. I think I've got the birthday right. I just followed the links on Wikipedia. If this is not the right chart, I'm sorry. But it seems to be April the 11th, 1987. So he had just had a birthday. And what we see in this chart, we don't know exactly where his moon is. He has a moon in Virgo. We don't know what degree of Virgo. He's an Aries. I suppose you could say that this is the worst way you can be an Aries. He takes the initiative. He takes the initiative in a really dramatic and horrific way. And he's got Mercury fairly close to Skeet. Skeet is a star connected with disaster, shipwrecks. He's got Mercury there. Mercury in Pisces does not actually work very well. Mercury is in its detriment in Pisces, and his Mercury is square Uranus. So I suppose you can say with that Mercury square Uranus, he gets excitable. I suppose that might be linked with conspiracy theories. And so that's his chart. He's got Jupiter-Neptune square. Jupiter-Neptune square can be about fantasies. That's certainly possible. Fantasies and conspiracies. It's usually Jupiter-Neptune just plain being a bit over-optimistic, hoping that things are going to turn out right. But in this case, there may have been something quite fantastic about his fantasies, and which ended in his self-immolation. Looking at the main transit in his chart, comparing what was going on in his chart with the self-immolation, I said. I think that's right. Yes, that's his chart, and we've got this. There is Mars. Mars, when he self-immolated, was at 2134. Was at 2134 Pisces. And remember that Mars is on the Saturn-Neptune midpoint, and that Mars was square his Saturn. And so I suppose you could say Mars square Saturn could be literally about death. I mean, that is one way of looking at it. And Mars was also semi-sextile his Sun. So he had a Sun trine Saturn in his chart, which doesn't sound as if he was really able to use that Sun trine Saturn. I mean, I suppose you could say in some perverse way, actually getting it together to self-immolate is sort of Sun trine Saturn. Sun in Aries, Saturn in Sagittarius. I suppose that's possible. And then Mars is square his Saturn and semi-sextile his Sun, and Chiron is starting to be close to his Sun. So it seems to have mainly been about Mars being semi-square his Sun. And in fact, I think we see it. Oh, I think I get it now. Remember remember that I said that Mars was sextile his Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Sorry, but when the immolation happened, Mars was sextile Jupiter and Mars was sextile Uranus. So there was a Mars sextile Jupiter, Mars sextile Uranus. So if we take this sextile in the sky and we ask ourselves, what is the midpoint between Mars at 21 Pisces and Jupiter-Uranus at 21 Taurus? Well, the midpoint is 21 Aries. And so the transiting Mars-Jupiter and Mars-Uranus midpoint was exactly on his sun. And this is when he set himself on fire. So transiting midpoints maybe is something to consider. Now, if you want to explore transiting midpoints, if you go to the astro.com ephemeris page, you can actually see a connection for midpoint transits. It's a bit overwhelming if you really want to get into transiting midpoint, but there is an ephemeris for any year you want showing where the transiting midpoints are. So if you're interested, that I would suggest that you have a look at that. I will try to put a link in the description to the page on astro.com where you can see transiting midpoints. Finally, I just wanted to quickly look at his solar return, because he just had his birthday, didn't he? He had his birthday. His birthday was on April the 11th, 1987. So what about his solar return for this year, for April the 10th, 1024? Well, I think that was a Wednesday, wasn't it? Look, Mars-Saturn conjunction in Pisces. QED, kind of, isn't it? So yes, there was an exact Mars-Saturn conjunction in his solar return, which just took place, pretty much just over a week before he set himself on fire. And I'm afraid that seems to fit very well. So that's Max Azzarello. I want to quickly say something about the foreign aid bill which went through Congress, and I don't know what time. Okay, it went through the House of Representatives. I believe the Senate still has to pass it, and I suppose that Biden still has to sign off on it. But here's the foreign aid bill. I've gone for 5 p.m. Don't take this time too seriously, but this was Saturday when it got passed in the House of Representatives. This is the main thing, because everything else is just pro forma. This is when we know that this aid is going to go to, this $61 billion is going to go to Ukraine. So just a quick look at what was actually going on. Firstly, Moon is void of course. It's not going anywhere except an opposition of Neptune. I think the Moon opposition Neptune does indicate that there is a fundamental fantasy about it. That's the first point. And Mercury is still retrograde. Yes, I'm sure the Senate and the President is going to sign off on it. If they've got any sense, they will wait for Mercury to go direct, but maybe they'll be in a hurry. So the moon is void, and we have a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. So it was passed on the day of a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and certainly amongst the neocons, amongst the Ukrainians, there's going to be an enormous sense of relief. And Ebertin says about this that it is the thank the Lord aspect. Zelensky was thanking the Americans for providing this $61 billion. Of course, it's not going to all go to him. But that is Jupiter-Uranus in action. So we've just seen the self-immolation of Max Azzarello, and maybe in a sense this is almost a similar type of immolation. But I suppose, as a result of this, the war will just continue for a bit longer. I don't think the result, I mean, everyone knows that Russia's in the end going to win, I think, but still, it will prolong the war. And Jupiter-Uranus, short term, there is this sense of relief that, it's done, the money's there. And I'm just wondering, what was going on in the mind of Mike Johnson. Now, Mike Johnson is Speaker of the House of Representatives. I don't have a time of birth. His chart does not make a great deal of sense to me. I mean, I haven't, because I don't really know much about him, but here's Mike Johnson's chart. And it was basically because of him that the bill went through. And one wonders what kind of pressure he was under. And of course, his position as Speaker of the House of Representatives is a bit precarious now, because there are some people in the Republican Party who want to be rid of him now, because he's kind of let them down. And I didn't really want to look at his chart from the perspective of transits. Rather, I wanted to quickly look at it in terms of his solar arc directions. So if we look at Mike Johnson's solar arc directions, so remember, he is what he's going to be. He is 52 years old. He was born on, I believe, January the 30th, 1972. And there in the middle is his chart. And on the outer wheel is his solar arc directions. Like, you move everything, you move everything by 1 degree per year. And if we take solar arc directed Neptune, it's conjunct his Mercury. So the question is, did he really know what he was doing? There is a certain sense of confusion there. Although we don't know his time of birth, this Mercury conjunct Neptune is going to get stronger. And so this might be a time when, he's not fully aware of, I don't think, what's going on in Ukraine, perhaps not what's going on in his country. And I think that the pressure, whatever pressure was put upon him, must have been quite strong and quite confusing there. He couldn't deal with the pressure. It was, I suppose, he was maybe pressurized by people who really knew how to pressurize him. So I think that is one possibility of how that Neptune conjunct his Mercury was working out. So I don't think I really want to say anything more about his chart. I don't think there's much to say, especially because I don't have a time of birth for him. So that's Mike Johnson's chart. Oh, sorry, one other thing. Sorry, I knew there was something else. His Saturn is at 29 Taurus in his natal chart. So you move his Saturn just over 50 degrees, and Saturn moves to 22 degrees 4 Cancer. Now, his natal Mars is in Aries. So his directed Saturn is square his Mars. It's coming up to the square of his Mars. This is going to be really difficult for him, and regardless of whether Republicans are able to unseat him or not, I think there's coming up for him is a lot of frustration. And maybe it's because of pressure within his party. Maybe he, at some stage, starts to realize the full implications of what he's done. And that maybe with that Neptune conjunct Mercury, he will at some stage realize that he's been deceived. So that is the position. That's the position for, those are the solar arc directions for Mike Johnson. I didn't want to say anything else about that. But I did want to consider how this passing of the bill was impacting other organizations and other people. For example, how is it affecting Ukraine? Ukraine is getting this money, this however much money it is. It's $61 billion. And so let's look at Ukraine's chart. So this is the chart of Ukraine, and August the 24th, 1991. So you would have thought that from a Ukrainian perspective, there's going to be a real sense of happiness, excitement, the money's here. So let's actually consider, there's Ukraine on the outer wheel. In the inner wheel is Ukraine. And there is the positions when the House bill got passed. And there is Ukraine's Mars. Ukraine has its Mars at 25 Virgo. So at the time the House bill was passed, the moon was opposition Neptune. And Mars, you see, Mars is, so there's a Mars-Neptune conjunction linking up with the moon. And so I would see this, I don't know, I don't think that the country itself is particularly elevated by this House bill happening. Mars is just the army, it's Ukraine defending itself. Mars is opposition Mars. It's Neptune is kind of involved there. And we shouldn't forget that right now, Saturn is at 15 Pisces. So Saturn is moving towards the opposition of Mars. That Saturn doesn't make the opposition of Mars for some time, not until next year. But the transiting Mars-Saturn midpoint is moving towards Mars. And so, given this link to Ukraine's Mars, I don't think that is particularly positive, and that may just indicate the whole futility of what Ukraine is involved with. And if there is a positive, you can see why it happened on that day. Ukraine has its sun in Virgo when it was born. There's Ukraine's sun, 0 degrees 56 Virgo. And when the House bill was passed, the sun was at 116 Taurus. So sun trine sun kind of gives the country a lift. I think that's nice. Sun trine sun. Things move. A trine, it's about energy, things moving. And finally, this House bill gets passed. But we really should not forget. We just shouldn't forget Mars, Saturn, and Neptune hitting Ukraine's Mars. As far as the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is concerned, yeah, I think we get this as well. There's the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and it's square the moon. Now, the moon might be the Ukrainian people, and Jupiter-Uranus is, it's the thank the Lord aspect. And so that Jupiter-Uranus as the thank the Lord aspect is square the moon. And look at the moon. It's pretty close to the second house cusp. That's the money. And there's the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, square the moon. So looking at Ukraine's chart, I think you can actually see the House bill actually is a big deal for Ukraine. It does allow them to fight a bit longer. It does, I think, short term, I think people are quite excited about it, I think, genuinely speaking. But one wonders what they're actually excited about. Excited about the ability to prolong the war. And Jupiter-Uranus is not always fortunate. Ukraine has to fulfill its side of the bargain. You've had increased mobilization now. More Ukrainian young men are going to be thrown into the meat grinder. And that's perhaps that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction square the moon. I suppose Ukraine is fulfilling its side of the bargain. It seems to be a bit of a Faustian bargain, doesn't it? And how about Volodymyr Zelensky? I mean, he was thanking the country for thanking the United States for passing the bill, and so just seeing what's happening. There is Volodymyr Zelensky's Sun-Venus conjunction. A reminder, we have a full moon on Tuesday. That full moon is at 4 Scorpio. That full moon is square Volodymyr Zelensky's Sun-Venus conjunction. So aside from that, he's got, seeing if there's anything happening. I don't think it's particularly dramatic. There's Mercury. Mercury is at 16 Aries, so Mercury's opposition is Pluto. So perhaps there's an issue of power. Who's the one with the power? Is it Volodymyr Zelensky, or is it the United States? He may feel he's got Congress, to the House of Representatives, to support the bill, but what about the cost in terms of, his own power? And at the time of the bill passing, Mars was at 22-27 Pisces, so that was square his ascendant. So he's got Mars square his ascendant. The Saturn-Mars conjunction is going to be soon enough. The Mars-Saturn midpoint is going to be square his ascendant. So I don't know, from his perspective, I'm not sure if it was necessarily such a big deal. I can't see any major transits there. I'm not really looking very hard. Then there's United States. How's it affecting the United States? I'm looking at the United States' Neptune. Neptune in 22-25 Virgo. I'd see Neptune in 22-25 Virgo in America's 9th house. Delusions about foreign adventures, you could say. And Mars, at the timing of the House bill, was at 22-27 Pisces. Mars was exactly opposition the United States' Neptune. And the moon, that whole moon-Mars opposition was hitting a Neptune. So there is a certain deluded quality there, I think. So sort of the Neptune comes up again. And I think the fact that the moon was opposition Neptune when the House bill was passed does sort of tell us something about about what it's all about. And I think there is an element of deception here. And though one individual, not just Zelensky, who's happy, would of course be Joe Biden. Joe Biden must be really happy. He really is a fanatical supporter of Ukraine. And there's Joe Biden's Mercury at 21-32 Scorpio. And the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is opposition his Mercury. So there's some good news for Joe Biden. It might be an opposition, but still he's got Jupiter-Uranus hitting his Mercury. That is something for him to be happy about. A final chart I want to look at, two more charts I want to look at actually, is I want to look at the chart of just a reminder that one other thing about Joe Biden. Joe Biden has got his moon in Taurus. So Joe Biden's moon in Taurus is trine Ukraine's sun at 0 degrees Virgo. And so the sun going into Taurus was conjunct Joe Biden's moon, and it was trine Ukraine's sun. So again, we've got that sun in Taurus really making things happen. And the sun is not just conjunct Biden's Taurus, it's trine Biden's North Node. And Biden has his North Node at 0 degrees Virgo. And of course, Ukraine has its sun at 0 degrees Virgo. So that, hence this connection between Biden and Ukraine. And you can throw in Hunter Biden and Busan, what's that energy company, and all of the Ukraine connection if you want with Biden's North Node in Virgo. And what else? Yes, this decision to confiscate Russia, or that this bill, House bill, saying that they can confiscate Russian assets, of course, this is very serious because it is a threat to the dollar. Because a lot of countries are going to think twice about, for example, buying American U.S. treasuries, because what happens? What if it gets confiscated? Chinese, any BRICS country worried about how they're going to be treated by the United States. This could be a threat to the dollar. So I thought it might be useful to quickly look at the chart of the US dollar. And here's a chart of the US dollar, April the 2nd, 1792. I don't know what time the dollar was born. This is a chart that people use for the US dollar. And I wanted just very quickly to see if there's any connections going on. I think the main thing happening here is that Mars is at 22 Pisces. There's Mars, there's Saturn. Saturn is going to go stationary direct, I think, at around 19 Pisces in a few months' time. But this Mars-Saturn conjunction is starting to hit the dollar's Mars in Virgo. And I suppose Mars in Virgo would be the way the US dollar defends itself, how it keeps itself going as the reserve currency of the world. Because remember, being a reserve currency gives America enormous privileges, allows it to maintain a huge debt. So any threat to the dollar, certainly as a reserve currency, could be devastating for the United States. And I think that with this Mars-Saturn conjunction hitting Mars, the dollar's Mars, it may be interesting, and maybe particularly over the summer there could be quite a battle with the US and how it defends its currency, and how, because this thing about okaying confiscation of Russian assets, it has very serious implications. But I don't want to take this too seriously because I don't have a time of birth for the dollar. But I think it's just a reminder that it is one chart that we should perhaps consider. Okay, that's all I'm going to say for today. Really sorry about the dog barking, but if a dog needs to express itself, the dog needs to express itself, and that's the way it is. And there is a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, so it's yesterday, and I think you have to respect the dog's need to freely express itself and to freely bark. I hope you understand that. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I would be grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed and you enjoyed the video, then of course I would be really happy for you to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. And yes, thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.